right, we are live. Everyone, I am here with Shanth Enjeti, graphic novelist, awesome painter.
No, thank you.
His work had quite a big influence on me early on when I was making my graphic novel, and I did not get acquainted with him until pretty recently. So before I introduce Shanth, I'm going to say hello to everybody who's in the chat here. We've got Sony Hyena. What's up, Sony? Good to see you. Let's see. Raji Le Dissanature. Okay. Bonjour. Oh, Privyet, back at you. That's the only foreign language I can speak. Kobodok from Bongistan. Good to see you. And Nick Titus. Welcome. Welcome, everybody. All right. So, anyways, with that out of the way, so, Shanth, I stumbled upon you online. The first time I came across your work was probably around 2016 or so, but I didn't really have any context for you as a person or an individual creator until I can't remember. I think I found you on Instagram. I was like looking through mutual follows, like people like, it was mostly like people I knew who went to RISD, like Nicholas Cole and a few others. And, and I saw that you had done some artwork for Black Flag by Dan Fraga, which was a campaign I backed last year. And so I followed the breadcrumbs over to your YouTube channel, saw that you were streaming, and that's where I dropped in and stuff, and saw that you were about to release a graphic novel. So,
Yep.
yeah, that's like my little context for how I got connected with you. But so if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and just
Sure.
tell
Yeah,
my crew
absolutely.
who you are, what you do.
Absolutely. So, my name is again Shanth Enjeti. I'm an illustrator artist. I taught college for about 18 years and studied mythology and taught mythology and character design and that kind of stuff. And I've just been working as an artist and illustrator my entire adult life. Did my first comic book job, I think, when I was 17. And actually, Andy Smith did the cover on it, which always cracks me up in terms of how things come full circle. And so yeah, so I started doing the various things in terms of self-publishing my own art books. I've self-published two of those, and then was doing videos behind the scenes for EVS, those intro videos and things like that. Doing some commission work here and there, and then finally I decided I wanted to do my own comic book, and that's what Nosfero the Crypt Walker is. So yeah, hi to the chat, hi CG, hi Comicsgate, good to see you guys, and glad to be here.
Awesome, man. Yeah, it's great to finally talk with you in real time. So, before I get into quizzing you on your book and stuff, which I'm extremely
Mm-hmm.
hyped about, I found out about you through your whole theory of
Mm-hmm.
mythophoric character design.
Yeah,
I can't remember when I first came upon that. It was something that again, I think it was Nicholas Cole or
sure.
someone in that kind of like RISD illustrator kind of group that linked to it. And that happened upon me at a time when I had just kind of come up with the core idea for my graphic novel,
Mm-hmm.
which the working title is Wyatt. That's just the
Yeah.
main character's name. The full title would be something else. And I was, struggling. I had the main character roughly designed out, but I
Mm-hmm.
was struggling with a lot of the other elements. And then I came upon something that you had written, and I'm going to put the links
Sure.
in the show notes afterwards for anybody who wants to know what I'm talking about. Where you basically had this whole theory about shape design and what it means with characters that influenced me tremendously. It explained
Oh
a lot
wow.
of things that I knew on a gut level, but didn't know how to take into action. So, what can you tell us about that whole? I don't know that whole process or that whole
Mm,
theory, and how did you come up with it, and
wow.
what is it exactly?
Well, it's funny. I think the thing that I got most out of my time at college was a teacher showed me Joseph Campbell in The Power of Myth. And I always say that Joseph Campbell was probably the best teacher I had while I was in college. And that's, not, to make a disparaging, remark to anybody, but I mean, an outstanding mind, really broke everything down and introduced me to this whole idea of mythology. And I started thinking about, well, what are the things that are universal visually? They must exist. And I mean, I see certain motifs repeat, and people say, "Oh, well, this will make for appealing character design." And then I would ask, "Well, why does that make for appealing character design?" Or where can we see that proven? Like, if we were to test that theory, where can we see it proven? So I started doing all of this research and trying to, look at different people who've talked about it. Studied Carl Jung, started studying a lot of different people in, the field of mythology and psychology. And I came up with this system of how to, it's not a system for character creation, although that can be a part of it. It's more of a system of considering your ideas and what they could be used for, what they could mean. And I think that's a really big part of it, which is it's like if you start writing a story with a screenplay how-to and here are the beats, versus if you look at, write a screenplay and then you look at the beat sheet and go, okay, where are things here that I can flesh out? It gets a different result. So that's kind of how that went. I mean, that was my 20s, was coming up with that and then teaching it for, 20 years.
Oh, nice. Sorry, I have my mic on mute.
Oh, that's fine.
Also, I'm going to say hello real quick to
Sure.
my friend Fresher Luke. It's much better than the spoiled Luke sitting at the back of the fridge gathering mold. But yes, Luke, I do stream on YouTube, just not very often. I mostly stream on Twitch. So YouTube is where I do my talks with other artists and stuff. I'd love to have you on, by the way, Luke. So hit me up sometime. Oh yes, Colin Brefka is flattering me and all that. Yeah, that's right. I am a cleavage streamer. I am a sex worker basically, because I give everybody the the Rob Liefeld titty streaming that they crave.
Sometimes you got it.
Yeah, but anyways, yeah. So I was pretty influenced by Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung as well, although probably not until way later in life. Like I found out about, I had known about Joseph Campbell for a while, but didn't really delve into any of his writings or his theories or what have you until maybe about like 2016-ish or so. That was again around the time that I started crafting my graphic novel, and I got into Joseph Campbell, Carl Jung, Jordan Peterson, a lot of those other mythopoetic psychology, story theory, self-help type guys that kind of picked and choose things from them that I found useful, guiding my own kind of both story path and personal spiritual path and whatnot. So I want to talk a little bit about your book here. Actually, we're probably going to talk a lot about your book.
Sure.
And that
syncs up really well, by the way, with the book.
Yeah.
Everything you're talking, everything you're talking about are things that are in the book and a part of my own personal journey and a part of that stuff. So yeah, that's a great start.
Yeah, let's go ahead and get into that. While you're introducing it, I'm going to remind people that the link to his Indiegogo campaign for it is in the chat here. So definitely check it out. And he's one of the few comic artists out there who's working in totally traditional media. Am I right?
Sure. I'm going to do the lettering digital, but other than that, everything's created in traditional.
Nice. Yeah, I used to do a lot of work in watercolors and gouache. I still love it. I still love the feeling of physical media and stuff, but my brain just could not handle how punishing that level of media commitment is to the lines you're making for a big story project. But anyways, yeah, go ahead and give us like the intro, like what's it about? Where did you get the idea from it? What are some of your inspirations? And just tell us everything about it. While you're doing that, I'll try to get some samples up on the screen here.
Sure, of course. Yeah, well, let's go back to what you were saying, because it's a perfect tie-in, right, to what, why I'm where I am right now, why I am, have moved out of academia and into this sphere, which is, so I've been on my own kind of, the thing about when you're doing this kind of work, and the thing about any academic work that you can run into sometimes. Oh, sorry. They're my kids. Sorry. They're 16.
No worries.
Yeah, no, that got me. But the thing I started thinking about a lot as I was in, these intellectual or pseudo-intellectual circles that I was in, was this idea of, all of these ideas, all of these concepts are great, but they're really of no use if there's no practical application to them. Like, what do we do with these things? So while it's interesting to contemplate all of these ideas, you've got to figure out what these things mean for your life and how you're going to apply them. So, for example, talking about art, or one of my favorite things in the world, which is, I'm a huge boxing fan. Talking about boxing is completely different than understanding things like your footwork. And so when I watch amazing fighters do it, knowing how complicated it is, I have an appreciation for it. And I certainly don't think I could teach boxing based on the fact that I watched a lot of it. And it's the same thing with art. And so for me, when I was writing this story, I started thinking about, the whole time period I know growing up in terms of stories about vampires and stories about evil. It seemed that leading up to the 90s, maybe, and leading up, certainly into the 2000s, we had come up with, in our own sort of mythological storytelling sense, really amazing descriptors for evil and the power of evil forces and evil spirits, so to speak, or elder things, or, there's this incredibly articulate linguistic there. But starting around the end of probably, there's a little bit of it in Coppola's Dracula, but pretty much with the Hammer horror films, we lost a counter spiritual bedrock for our storytelling, which is to say that, if you've watched the Blade movies or anything else, there's always this joyous kind of mockery when somebody tries to use a cross or religious symbol to fend off evil. And the vampires will say, that doesn't work. You've read too many stories, which is, again, quite meta and very postmodernist to kind of, take away you're kind of trying to half tell the fictional world, which works. I mean, it worked for its time, and I love, the Blade movies and all that. But I started thinking to myself about, after a good friend of mine, a guy named Michael who has a channel called The Choice Voice, and he is a huge Hammer horror film fan. And he started talking about how he loved Peter Cushing, his favorite actor, and his portrayal of Van Helsing. So I started checking out these movies, and I saw these noble characters, and I thought to myself, what is this thing I want to talk about with Nosferatu? Nosferatu is a character, for all intents and purposes, who is fighting this battle against the forces of darkness. He believes in the forces of good and the power of good, and he believes in all of these things, but in a lot of ways, the language he understands as a character is very much the articulate linguistics of what he's fighting, what he's against. But he doesn't really have a why in terms of what he's for. So the story begins with him locked in the battle with these forces of evil that are vampires who are trying to, much like cultists in the Cthulhu mythos, trying to open doors to these evil, prodigious beings. And he's fighting them essentially with what he knows of their world. And by rescuing this female lead, this female character we're going to introduce, it's almost like what C.S. Lewis would talk about. It's almost like springtime comes into his life and he realizes, I'm basically hollowed out trying to fight evil, and I can't win because there's nothing in me that I'm drawing from. There's no counter force. So I'm trying to drown the ocean, so to speak, and I can't win. And he doesn't know why he's not winning. He's not thinking about it, but he meets her, and she's that serendipitous little interaction, much like what is going on right now. I see this all the time in life, that brings beauty and a sense of the divine, and it gets him to kind of rethink how he's going about it, because it's almost like this. He feels like, because he's in this evil world and because of his own difficult, sort of past of being born out of this sort of evil culture, that it's almost like he's defending these ideas of good while feeling like he can't really use them because he's not worthy of it, so to speak. And she challenges that idea. And she comes into the story and she gets him to challenge it by, like, she doesn't make sense to him. And I like that idea of the person being confronted with somebody who is good and decent and kind in a world where, as you can see from the evil vampire priestess summoning the creature there, that's all he knows. So it's kind of like this part of the equation doesn't make sense, so I have to expand my world to include good. It can't just be a battle of evil versus less evil, or less nihilism versus hopelessness, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I personally I thrive exactly on that kind of contrast in my own storytelling too. Like my graphic novel is, I mean, in real short, it's about a young, vulnerable, uh, young guy protagonist who's on the run from incredible forces of darkness that he doesn't even understand,
Mm.
but he has this veteran, super warrior protecting him. This kind of Terminator 2, John Connor kind of
Sure, yeah.
dynamic a little bit. But by their two, wildly contrasting natures, kind of ends up being the thing that in a way sort of heals them both.
Hmm.
That kind of thing. Like the younger character, he kind of has to learn how to grow up and be a man basically, because he had nobody to teach him those things. And the brutal, machine gunning guardian protector type guy, perhaps he might get back in touch with some lost part of himself as well.
Hmm.
Yeah, everything that you were talking about, like when I heard you talking about some of these things in your live streams, like I clicked with it immediately. I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy gets it. Like he's describing everything that I feel is just catastrophically lacking
Hmm.
in modern, not just modern movies, but modern storytelling in general. Um, we could go on forever about like what exactly is the root cause of it. Where is the where where's the head of the octopus that all the tentacles are coming
Hmm.
at from the underworld or whatever. But I don't know. Everything is just so written by committee, focus group to hell, or what have you. Like I was thinking, I was actually rewatching parts of Bram Stoker's Dracula
Yep. Hmm.
recently, just
Just
because
watched it the other day.
it's so good. I mean,
Yeah,
it's the season to watch it too.
absolutely.
And I was just thinking to myself, like, this would just never get made today,
Mm.
both conceptually and just in the edge that it has to it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very steeped in Christian mythology. It
Hmm.
treats it as serious and real, not with this kind of cynical, um, like, oh, the vampire hunters are naive and symbols
Sure.
are meaningless kind of way that we would see now.
Hmm.
I was amazed later on to find out that Mike Mignola, I guess, did the graphic novel
I've
treatment
got
for
it.
it, and
It's
it was,
beautiful.
I need to get it so
They
bad.
just re-released it a few years ago. Well, what's so funny about that, right, is that, and I think Jordan Peterson's talked about that. It's a really it's a really simple root cause and a root problem, and it's not something I take lightly. But I said this to my students. Funny enough, right before all of this stuff happened with the pandemic and everything like that. And I said to them, I go, what the biggest issue a lot of you guys are struggling with, and the people are struggling with, is when you see enough, whether you see a lot in your life or you see nothing in your life, you have to come to a decision of whether you're all in on life or you're not. And if you're not, the only option you really can do and the only thing you bring to the world is sucking the life out of everybody else. Now, Campbell said that, right? Say yes to the adventure of being alive or say no. And I came to that realization because, frankly, I cannot, I, can't, through every means possible to stake the vampire that is hope, I've been unsuccessful to do so. And I wake up in the morning and I do painted work, and a lot of it is discipline, a lot of it is passion, a lot of it is storytelling. But at the end of the day, when it comes to what are the things that I'm going to dedicate my life to, this comic book is about telling people that let me paint a visual picture for you that ties in Hammer horror, Lovecraft, and something that I want to see, which is why I'm doing this book. So imagine that gateway that opens up in the Cthulhu mythos, or you see it all the time, right? And the Hellboy stories, or I'm just trying to think of all the different things. And there's this giant squid-like creature coming at this tiny figure standing in front of it as it comes through this gateway. Now, that is in a lot of ways what we're experiencing right now. Now, for the sake of my storytelling and my Hammer horror influence, imagine that person is Peter Cushing, and he reaches into his coat pocket and he holds out a cross, and the creature recoils. This cosmic creature recoils from this. Now, what that starts to do, and why that excites me in terms of storytelling, is we have this, we've created this increasingly complicated use of the older, scary, creepy myths. Like, we've told background, and it's great. I love that stuff. But the thing about it is that we haven't brought those old traditions equally into prominence in the future. And so I started thinking to myself about, if we think of the forces of goodness or good or truth or whatever in the same rich context that Lovecraft thought about his mythos, what would we get? And that has been left sorely unexplored. And the problem is, you can't, it's that, you've probably heard this because Campbell, the two wolves inside of the person. You've heard, have you heard that one? Right? Which wolf wins? The one I feed? Well, we've only got one wolf, and culture is giving us one wolf, which is, what if everything is horseshit? What if everything is fake? Right? And the answer to that is exactly what you have. Then there's no point to anything. And we start flailing. Now, if you go in accordance with, what if there's some reason, like I always think about nurses, and I certainly have been thinking lately about flight attendants. Like, it's hopeless trying to get people to not act like morons on a plane, apparently. Like, it's kind of like, can you not kick this seat? Can you turn your cell phone off? Can you do whatever it is? And they kind of service with a smile, right? Or the nurses in the emergency room who are like, can I adjust your pillow? And I'm like, you've seen everything, and you're still taking the time to adjust my pillow. Well, that to me is a manifestation of that goodness. And when you put it out into the world, it is equally powerful, sometimes more powerful, to kind of, and so that's what my courses were about in some ways. And that's what that idea was about, which is, let's look at the fact that, that again, another C.S. Lewis thing, he talked about, the spiritual food thing. And he goes, in the absence of food, we have to understand that people will eat poison.
And I think one of my favorite quotes by him.
Isn't it great? It's brutal.
Yeah.
That's what I like about Campbell and Peterson. There's a little bit of the Stoic philosophy in them, and I would read about Epictetus, the Greek slave who became the big philosopher in Rome before they expelled all the philosophers. And he started his life as a slave, and his philosophy about things is just astounding when you read it. You go, how did you get to this point? So when I'm and that's the stuff that for me, this character starts out as a noble cynic, and a noble cynic and a cynic in general cannot tolerate, enthusiasm, romance, all of the positive feelings of losing control, not from awful things, but from good things. And those are the very things that you need to powerfully combat evil. You need to be fighting for something. You can't just be fighting against something. And I think that's why when students would talk to me, I would say, I'm so sick of people saying that all horror is political. Like, all horror stories are political. I go, no, actually, those are the worst ones, in my opinion, by and large. I said, but all politics is horror. That's how it actually goes. You put that into anything. So for me, there's an inherent beauty that's possible in these horror stories, much like with the image you were showing. And, when I'm doing stuff like, sorry about hitting the mic there.
Oh, yeah. Here, I'll enlarge you on the screen here.
Oh, sure.
Let me see. How do I embiggen you? There we go.
So when I'm doing stuff like this, right, there we go. Just making sure it's in camera. And I'm creating this stuff. This is a character who is traveling through this sort of dark ether-like underworld, almost a Lovecraftian underworld of these kind of moray eel demons and all of these people reaching. And he does this to go from place to place. And this, hellhound, which is essentially, inspired by the Hound of the Baskervilles. Let me grab this one here, which is I'm working on today. Got a bunch of this is one of the few I'm working on that I can show. But it's the let's see if I can get the light on it. It's the combination of, there we go. It's the combination of everything I like about, the Hound of the Baskervilles and things like that, and Sherlock Holmes and 1930s Universal horror films. Now, what we have the opportunity to do as storytellers, and what I'm taking the opportunity to do with Nosfero, is I want to make a world that is an immaculate reality that's rich, as Campbell, and Kurosawa, I think, was the first person to use the term immaculate reality. And what I mean by that is, the werewolf that biting a person and then making them a werewolf is as old as the Wolfman, 1941. It feels timeless, but it was invented. The silver bullet, or the silver killing a werewolf, was invented more or less in that movie. And so was the saying, even a man who's pure of heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the autumn moon is bright. The person who wrote the screenplay for that fled Nazi Germany and was a Jewish American creator who came to Universal. So these people who were writing these stories, whether it was Carl Laemmle Sr. or anyone else, they had started out in as tailors in shoe shops or fleeing tremendous things. And the message they gave us during a time of economic depression and recession, much like Disney, is they gave us this beautiful look at horror. And they are beautiful films. They're rich films. And so when I look at Lovecraft, I think that's the thing that interests me the most, is in the potential for, I love the Evil Dead movies, I'll be honest with you. And I love that take on the Necronomicon. And there's also this chance for this rich, the shadow pulp beauty, that Razorfist was lovingly ranting about the other day.
Yeah, he's great.
And I love everything he said, especially the Rocketeer, because I'm a massive Rocketeer fan.
It's one of my oh gosh, I love that movie so much. I try to watch that I'm probably gonna watch it once a year from now on. Yeah, James Horner. Oh my gosh,
crushed it.
Nobody composes like that anymore. It's
too
sincere.
That is it. It's the only thing that cynicism really can't tolerate is relentless sincerity. Yes. Relentless sincerity is tough. When people, it's absolutely. I'm just looking at the chat. Absolutely, such a great film. And I look at stuff, and I watched a movie, not a movie. I watched a show recently that was The Haunting of Hill House. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's on Netflix.
I haven't seen it, but the name is familiar. Yeah,
it's a adaptation of a horror novel, and it is such a brutal series. And it is really about people recovering from, trauma and all this stuff. But it's done as a combination of pulp, beautiful writing, great character stuff. I mean, that show blew my mind. It's the same reason I like Guillermo del Toro, because based on a person's experiences or whatever those experiences are, sometimes I need to see my storytelling. I like stuff that is positive and hopeful, because sometimes I'm like, I've seen enough awful shit in my life, right? We all get to that point. But the thing about it is that sometimes I need my stories to actually say, this is actually the shit. This is how it works. And sorry if your bubble doesn't work. And when someone can do that with hope, which is what they did so beautifully in that show, that's what it's about. I'm trying to think of the great movies that and stories who have done that. But when you see somebody where there's they're going into the belly of the beast, so to speak, and they are not losing their hope, versus when everything in your pop culture entertainment is the Wicker Man.
Yeah.
Isn't it all a funny sham and we end up on fire? It's like, okay, but now what? I got to go home and take out the trash.
Yeah, and it's not even the Christopher Lee Wicker Man. It's the Nicolas Cage Wicker Man, and we're all trapped inside it with him, with the bees.
Oh yeah, and think about this stuff for a minute too, which is the craziest thing about it, right? We when we do things, and I said this to one of the things I said one of my last few semesters at RISD, there was a lot of drama on that campus, and I remember saying to my students, you would think that if you were going to leave a position, maybe you'd take shots on the way out, but it's just not how I operate. I was done, I was ready to go, but I said to the students, I go, if you can, this is something I want you guys to be thinking about, that you can always take pride in, right? If you can be miserable here, you can be miserable anywhere. And that's something special. Do you know, I wake up in the morning and I've got people who want to back my book. And that's amazing to me. And I have to tell you this, sorry to bring your book up, but I'm going to. I love the name of the book.
Oh, thanks.
I do, and I take that with a grain of salt. I know it's your creative thing, but sometimes I hear something and I'm like, I heard that and I went, the name is so good, and the way that the letters come together, I think is fantastic. And I just so do with that what you will.
Hey, thanks.
And I love the work, and I think that for me, I love Halloween, I love scary stuff, but I'm trying to have you ever eaten and I gotta be full disclosure, I enjoy the occasional Indian food. They're coming for me finally. Sorry, I live on a
Oh
busy
no.
street. They've got me now. They're like, is he talking about Jordan Peterson? So,
Oh
that's like,
man, I knew one guy who got canceled just for following him. Jeez.
yeah. Well, isn't that the great thing about? Isn't that like the great thing about, depending on what one's experiences are, if and again, I'm assuming we both have them. You survive enough stuff, and you just kind of go, like, I've seen such horrible shit. This isn't going to be the one that breaks me. It's like, I'm
Yeah.
trying to figure out how to live. If you're bringing the nihilism to me, cool. That's like a warm blanket at this point. What makes me uncomfortable is somebody coming up to me and going, "Hey, good job." I would like seriously, when people come up to you and go, "I hate your shit," it's way like if someone comes up to you and goes, "Hey, man, I'm proud of you." Like I watched Shane Davis be tortured when Ethan was
Oh.
praising his work on Inglorious Rex. There's this one stream, and he goes, "This is the
Oh,
best
okay.
work you're ever doing." And Shane, I was like, I could feel him turning inside out. He was like, "Can you go back to calling me a Nazi?" Like he had that look on his face. and I look at this stuff, and when I'm doing this book, I'm going, I love art. I am doing what the artists who worked on the cave paintings did, and I'm doing this because for at least 40,000 years, we've needed this to
Yes.
speak in this language and say, "Do you get what I get?" And so it is a very special and almost sacred thing to me when people back this book and support it. And I'm like, I want you to open this book and think, this guy loves art. And he is sharing his art with me. And the reason it exists is because I've backed it and supported it. And he really gives a damn. And that's the biggest thing for me. It's like, but at the same time, right, I'm also in the same thing with your boy Zach, right? In terms of one of his early things, I sell hot dogs. It's a hot dog stand,
Mm-hmm.
and this is my job: make a good hot dog. But when I go to see, when I go to read a Lovecraft story, it's a hot dog stand, but it's going to blow my mind. Like that's what he's
Yeah.
selling. The hot dog is mind blowing, and for me, it's that feeling. And I know you probably enjoy Halloween as much as I do. But I said this to my buddy on the phone, and it's the best description of my artwork and my storytelling. I create my work as if I'm decorating the paper or the page of the book for Halloween.
Mm.
You know that great
Yeah.
Halloween feeling?
Oh,
Like when you
yeah.
go somewhere and it's perfect, and it can be pumpkin fields. It includes the whole experience, a beautiful moon, on some trees. It could be a scary, jump scare, but it's huge. It's to quote Campbell, prodigious. It's not just one tiny part of the elephant. It's rich, and that's the thing I love about making work.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Shoot, there was something I was about to tack onto that. No, I there was something you said about you mentioned C.S. Lewis a couple times. I wanted to
Sure.
circle back to that, and it also it ties into what you were describing about in order for horror to be meaningful, there has to be some kind of great good, contrasted against it. Have you read C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy?
I have not, and I think we've talked about this. I need to put
Okay.
that on my to-do list.
So the first book is like really classic, like Edgar Rice Burroughs kind of planetary adventure.
Nice.
I wouldn't call it sci-fi. It's like, Englishman goes to space, kind
Yeah.
of that kind of early 20th century sort of vibe. It's very John Carter of Mars type of, heroic stuff. The second one is basically nudist British World War I vet fights Satan on planet Venus. The third one,
Nice.
the third one you can actually read independently of the other two. Although I think it kind of gives you a nice, well-rounded appreciation if you read the two before it. That Hideous Strength, the third one,
Yes.
it is one of the most horrifying books I've ever read in my life.
Mm.
Nothing in 1984, Brave New World, or even Fahrenheit 451,
Hmm.
or I don't know, or any of Ayn Rand's boogeymen come
Hmm.
close to the goosebumps
Yeah.
that this gave me. And it's like straight up like if it's straight up cosmic horror. Like I
Yeah.
was reading this and I'm just thinking to myself like I can't believe that this was done by the same guy who gave us, Mr. Tumnus and the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and stuff. Like it is straight up like eldritch space demon terror, and I just could not believe like what I was reading. So I just highly recommend it. It was very influential on me.
It was The Hideous Strength. Someone was asking the name of the book. I think it
Yeah,
was The Hideous Strength.
That Hideous Strength.
Oh, That
Yeah,
Hideous Strength. Sorry.
by
And
by
well,
C.S. Lewis.
and this is the great thing, right? Oftentimes, when we talk about what's wrong with things, we don't realize how much ground we've given when we're talking. And you said something that I then realized how much ground I had given, if that makes sense. That's why I love these kinds of conversations. That's why I love hanging out with artists and people who are supporting the arts, right? And it's, of course, the guy who came up with Mr. Tumnus
Yeah.
could understand evil deeper, because the further you expand in one direction, like let's talk about this, wherein like the Christmas was redefined by A Christmas Carol. Like I could think about that forever. And
Yeah.
it's like, why is there like, okay, we're going into Narnia. Cool. You got me on that. Works great. Narnia, we're going in. There's a light post in the middle of, what the heck are you? It's barking. And Lovecraft could do that. He could howl at the moon, in his short, lifespan and difficult, state that he was living constantly in. He was able to articulate horror. C.S. Lewis, in his you see it in his other stuff, his kind of nonfiction stuff, his Grief Observed and things like that. You realize that he had the dark stuff down. He just didn't have a counterweight. So the further he reached on the seesaw, he could only go so far before it tipped. And I think once he had that other aspect in him, he was able to reach for that stuff in a way that is just mind bending. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think that they go hand in hand.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I talked about this recently in my Twitch stream, where, a lot of times I hear people, kind of, there's this recent trend, largely brought about by George R. Martin,
Mm,
of, kind of like dark, gritty, this is how it really was type of fantasy and stuff
yeah.
that sort of gets held up as like, somehow more honest than what Tolkien or Lewis did. And I would actually argue like that kind of stuff is, it's just an ugly lie in a lot of ways. And I say this as somebody who greatly enjoyed reading the Game of Thrones books.
Sure.
It was just fascinating stuff. I just wanted it was a really cool world. And, and even though I did get pretty frustrated enough to the point where I haven't finished it. The big thing I noticed is like, people will kind of like play George R. Martin off of Tolkien. They'll criticize Tolkien and Lewis, saying like, oh, but they wrote, they were such romanticists. They had these idealized noble knightly characters and stuff. And that's not how it really is. Things are a lot more gray and whatnot. I would actually say that like if you consider the fact that, look at the experiences that Lewis and Tolkien had versus what George R. Martin had.
You got it.
Lewis and Tolkien were both World War One veterans. They were at the Battle of the Somme, which was one of the most horrific meat grinders in human histories. Like, I like even like the worst parts of Iraq and Afghanistan like have absolutely like no comparison to what happened there. It's like I do think that it is impossible for anyone in the modern, at the very least in the first world, like unless you live through, I don't know, the siege of Sarajevo or something like that. We cannot comprehend like that level of mechanized horror of just like, you being like one of the 10 people who survives out of a company of like 100 men or whatever
Hmm.
that just all died in a day or something.
Yeah.
And that's what C.S. Lewis and Tolkien survived. So it makes sense to me that they would go on to write, these fantasy stories that, yeah, they have like tremendous larger than life evil in them, Sauron,
Hmm.
the White Witch. I mean, these are like truly like terrifyingly evil
Yes.
forces, but the good is like bigger than the good that we, experience in our day-to-day lives. But the whole point isn't to tell us like this is factually how it is each and every day. It's to tell you, to quote G.K. Chesterton, fairy stories don't tell us that dragons are real. They tell us that dragons can be slain.
Hmm.
And you look at George R. R. Martin's experience, he likes to write about characters where it's like, even though they're the protagonists, there are bits of heroism and stuff, but a lot of the
Hmm.
times, the characters are just like total bastards and backstabbers and
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, and just, backbiters and stuff like that. And yeah, that's what reality is like. People are catty, petty, uh, and a lot of times just, they turn on you and stuff like that. But you look at, a lot of the noble knightly characters are the ones who die first in the most brutal
Of
and
course.
unflattering ways in his stories. And I can't help but to think, like, well, he was also a draft dodger during Vietnam. And
Let's
I
add.
wonder if there is like some level of resentment towards, the people who are willing to, kind of worship heroism or something. There's actually a quote by Yukio Mishima, whose
Mm.
shirt I have right behind me.
Yes, I
He
was
was
noticing that.
yeah, he started off as he was Japan's like most popular poet and playwright, but he had tremendous survivor's guilt about
Mm.
being disqualified from service during World War II. He
Mhm.
felt that it was his patriotic duty to, to fight in that conflict. All of his classmates were, and they all got shipped off and they died horribly and stuff. And
Mhm.
he was racked with guilt about that. And so he took up bodybuilding to kind of complete his own life as part of his artwork. And he had a quote where he said that the kind of, I don't know, something like the kind of mentality that regards hero worship as comical is always rooted in a sense of inferiority or something. Like there's a resentment,
I think you're spot on with that, and I think the thing that I've been, I put a lot of thought into is when I was younger, and I was in my teens and my 20s. I used to have this fantasy that all of these people who had quote a easy upbringing or an easy life, so to speak, were inherently going to be happier in life. They were going to be less cynical. They were going to be more optimistic. And when I got older and I watched, and you see this actually, funny enough, being a college teacher, you realize that is actually far from the case. Now, it's not a predictor either way, but I think the thing about it is the great lie, right? The belief that people have, why they can't talk about that aspect of C.S. Lewis and Tolkien in any articulate fashion, why it has to be an afterthought, is because their entire ideology is once you've been experienced something that puts you in the way of harm and you've been a victim, once a victim, it is inescapable for you to get out of it. What's interesting is it seems once you haven't known, or once you've gotten to a certain age where you've never had to face actual, according to Hoyle, resiliency,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost impossible for you to, like, it's insufferable. It's intolerable to be rejected. It's
Yes.
intolerable for things not to work out perfect. Now, here's the funny thing, right? Is that if you, the problem with Game of Thrones or anything that's particularly nihilistic is that for someone like myself, I've now kind of evolved to have a little bit of difficulty with it. I find it a bit grotesque, but only because to me, the word I'd use for it is it's indulgent. What
Mm.
makes me suffer in many ways, narratively, what's hard for me is seeing hope, having and tolerating hope and positivity, and not having that immediate visceral reaction. And I think these people who don't have to overcome things and don't see it, deep down, they believe, and they're telling you, if the worst happened, I would be consumed by it spiritually, mentally. I would become evil. I would be destroyed by it. They're talking about their own lack of resiliency. Their characters aren't resilient. They either win or die. No one survives losing. And surviving losing is the exact way that we get resiliency. You know that quote, experience is what you get when you didn't get what you were trying for. It's yeah. That whole thing. And so when you're seeing me and I'm writing my book, right, I want you to picture those times when I was showing my portfolio in college and people were saying, laughing at the portfolio, like, oh, this doesn't work or this isn't there. And I was pretty solid, certainly by today's standards. I would have been pretty solid by some of the stuff I've seen on the stands, but not compared to Comicsgate. Let me be clear. I just looked at Aaron Lopresti's pages he just posted, and I was like, what am I, good God, those are amazing.
Oh, yeah. His stuff's amazing.
But you know what? It's the same thing with the stuff that you're doing, which I think is really great storytelling. I live for panel layouts and I live for placement, right? Did that hurt? Did you feel that sting when I said that? That's the thing I'm talking about that Lewis and them got. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like, I didn't understand racism at all. I experienced it like that, but I didn't understand it until I read The Shadow over Innsmouth, and I got to the reveal at the end, and I went, damn, is that what you people are afraid of? Holy cow. Like, it totally changed my life. And I'm like, everybody who wants to understand what that poor guy who was, yes, he was racist, he was all these things, and he was also starving and having his insides kill him in the last phase of his life because he had one shot with, this guy who was an anti-Semitic and fell in love with a Jewish woman because, again, right, so people go, how is that possible? I go, it's exactly what happens. Mm-hmm. And he couldn't hold on to her because she was like his kryptonite. Look, there's a shot for hope, happiness, belief, and a world outside of this horror. So that's what the cross is in the story. It's a symbol of, in Western society, in we can make it a symbol of cynicism, which I've seen. It's been done to death. For no other reason, it's been done to death. Why would, for me, it doesn't work anymore. Like, I'm like, do something edgy if you're going to do it.
I know, right?
Like, I'm like, I got it. That's like Madonna. Like, that's like a prayer. Like, I've already seen it down on my knee.
Like, seriously, yeah.
We've got it, right? It's but you imagine a character taking that out and having you as the author give it power. Having, we don't have to care about any characters in fiction. We care about them, funny enough, as a result of the circumstances and the world that they're inhabiting. And is there anything better than watching a true cynic, a true bureaucrat, and a true soldier of the cause, Princess Leia, break when she meets her perfect match and her antithesis? That's the glory of it. That's what makes us fall in love with her, is that she's fighting that. Like, she's not the new hope, but she becomes hopeful by the end. She's like, always, the Empire's still out there. Always, like, she's got to catastrophize. That's her life. That's why we love her. She's in it. She's in the shit. Then this guy comes along and goes, what about a kiss, though? What is the point? What are you fighting for at the end of this stuff, if not a loving relationship? It makes no difference. And
so true. Like, I didn't even think about that.
You know who she is, right? This is what I love.
What do you mean?
So I always tell people this, is that Princess Leia, what people don't get, and one of the things I find really intriguing about the prequels and meeting their parents, is Luke takes after his mother and she takes after her father. If she had been in Luke, she'd have probably gone over. Quick to anger, ready to grab that rifle, ready to act, ready to do things. She's her father's daughter.
I totally didn't even think about that, but it totally makes sense. Like, yeah, she's a politician. She's she's a senator, basically.
She's a senator.
She's Margaret Thatcher, basically.
She is. She's totally.
Wow, I totally did. She is.
Isn't
I mean, she's a sexier Margaret Thatcher, but
of course, that's right. Depending on whatever fickles your tansy. But this is the thing about it, right? Is so when I'm writing my story, I'm like, if I give this world of these Lovecraftian, demonic, characters coming out. And I put this in white, and she's beautiful. Like, she's in a sheer nightgown the first time you see her. She is femininity. Like this, she's not a political construct. She's the reason why, again, people write poetry, why there's so many illustrations of the nude female figure. It's because we're trying to understand it. It's not some glib thing. So many people try to do it, and it's horrible. The people who do get something that's happening there on this level. So what happens when you bring beauty into a, granted, romantically gothic, dark sort of world? What is the thing it evokes in us that makes us, gosh, I always say this. Picture a world, and it's insane, but go with me here. Picture a world where you're watching the movie Aliens, and she's surrounded by aliens, and all of a sudden Sigourney Weaver takes out a cross, and they all back off. How mind-bending. You just like, what the heck is this? Now, It's absurd in that kind of context. But if you think about it, she spent her whole life trying to get away from these aliens. You take away Newt, and her going to rescue Newt, what is the point? To just not get wiped out? Is that it?
Oh, and you bring up just like one of my favorite story examples ever. Like, anytime people tell me like, oh, that there's, we've never had it. We haven't had any good female protagonists and stuff and all that. And I'm like, have you been like freaking asleep since the 1980s? It's like Aliens is the perfect. It's a story about what it is about. It's about like two forms of maternity battling each other. There's the good mother and the dark mother. The queen, the alien queen. She's this biomechanical horror that represents death, all-consuming loss of individuality into the xeno horde or whatever. You die, but your biomass is assimilated into it in some form. Sure. And her children are all just disposable drones. Ripley, on the other hand, she loses her biological daughter, and the story isn't about like the Space Marines shooting stuff up and stuff. Although as a kid, that's what I loved, and that's what convinced me to join them. That's what convinced me to join the Marine Corps later on. Some people say Full Metal Jacket was their recruitment movie. For me, it was Aliens. But
that's right, Space Marines.
Yeah. But it's like, it's just such a perfectly packaged story. This whole idea about like, she literally descends to the underworld, to hell, to save, her child, which is, again, a very biblical parallel as well. Like, especially in I think in the, in the Roman Catholic Church, they emphasize this, but in Eastern Orthodoxy, in my church, we very intensely emphasize, during the lead up to Pascha, our version of our Easter, the whole aspect of the, after the crucifixion, there's the descent into Hades, to basically to gather the souls imprisoned there, which, I mean, that's basically, what is played out in Pinocchio. Going to the, you have to go to the belly of the whale to save your lost father figure, to save Abraham, and
that was good. Nice.
And that's exactly what Ripley is doing. And it's like, and as when I was younger, like I felt what was going on, and I knew without knowing what was going on. And it's like, now it's like, I'm struggling to see if like there's been anything recent that comes anything close to that. And I hate sounding like one of those people who's like, the new stuff isn't as good as the old stuff. Patooey. Like, the whole like get off my lawn kind of thing. It's like, we heard our parents say it and all that stuff, but it's like, I don't think that I'm crazy when I say that, like, there is truly something lost in contemporary storytelling where not only is everything more and more written by committee and, it's just focus group smoothed out and all this stuff. All the edges are kind of sanded off. But even worse than that, individual creators are censoring themselves. They are afraid to uh, be too sincere. Like I actually had this discussion with a good friend
Mm.
who's a animator. I'm not going to name names, but he's somebody whose work everybody has seen everywhere.
Yeah.
He's one of the best 2D animators out there in the business. And we were on the topic of like what is it with this whole like this recent trend. I would say it's like the past decade or so, particular this post 2010s thing in animation in particular. I would say North American animation overall. The French don't seem to have this problem as much as we
Mhm.
do. Japan certainly doesn't either, where everything. If you have adult animation, like quote adult animation,
Sure.
that basically means okay, it's gonna be perverse jokes and stuff. It's gonna be stuff like Sausage Party.
Yeah.
It's gonna be like listening to Howard Stern in the late '90s.
Yeah.
It's like okay, yeah, it might get a few laughs out of me, but it's not really gonna give me any kind of meaning. Okay, so
Mhm.
then what is being pushed as all ages or cartoon fun material?
Mhm.
Well, it's all stuff that's like, this really like noodly armed, ironic, postmodern kind of like everything has a color palette like a melting candy store
Mhm.
kind of look to it. The characters are all extremely rounded edges. They kind of have this sort of SSRI manic grin about them and stuff.
Sure.
And I'm
Yeah.
just kind of like, that stuff was kind of cool and novel when Adventure Time first came out. Like that was
Mhm.
fresh when we first saw it. It was really funny and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But then like everything kind of became that. And that's like now it's like, you see that in comics now. You see that in just people who are independent outside of the big studios choosing to do that. And his theory was that, or at least I don't even think it was a theory, like he directly observed this as working in the industry, that people were afraid of being seen as like exposing anything about their inner selves, about who they really were, or being narratively vulnerable with what they really believe. So they have to kind of present everything as this sort of like ironic, like everything is serious. Everything's inverted somehow
Mhm.
because frankly they went all their lives without taking a punch to the face. And so it kind of
Yeah.
ties back to what you said about like anything resembling rejection or being mocked for being too sincere is like a death sentence to them. So they have to put something out there that's like a joke version of what they believe, if they even believe anything.
See, and that's the thing. I think what you were saying, I would love to believe that. I used to believe that, frankly. I really did. And that was a part of me teaching. I mean, as a teacher, I used to believe that there's this great depth in every single person. But then I started thinking about it a lot, and I've come to the realization that the reason why so much of that stuff exists is because the people who are contracting it are hollow and the people who are making it are hollow. And I think it's an authentic reflection of that hollowness, which is to say that when you look at someone like Matt Groening, right, with Life is Hell, there's nothing hollow
Mm.
about that. When you look at, it's not the drawing style. What it is it's the content is as vapid as the thing you're seeing. And once the content is empty, the stylistic can't carry it, which is why like South Park can exist on one plateau where it's like we do this very one thing here, but we're very sophisticated over here. And there's this perfect, beautiful balance. It's why, when I look at Narwhal's stuff is a really good example. He
Yeah.
just does some astounding, like his layouts are like Alex Toth level insanity to me. Like some of the stuff he does is just brilliant. And then I look at Ethan's stuff, I look at Aaron's stuff, I look at everybody's work I look at. But here's the core feature to me. I think that's, you know what the Dunning-Kruger effect is? I'm sure you've probably heard of it.
I've heard it, and I've heard it so many times. I've
Oh yeah,
forgotten
let
what
me,
it
if
means.
I
So
can,
yeah,
if you'll
go ahead
indulge
and
me for a second.
refresh me.
Sure. So the Dunning-Kruger effect is the process by which people who score, they did this research, gosh, I forgot his experiment, where they were testing people, and they found that people who are unintelligent grossly overestimate how smart they are.
Mm.
And everyone knows this because they're too dumb to know they're dumb is the shorthand of it, they say. But here's the funnier part. People who are more intelligent underestimate and overlook all their qualities because they assume everyone else is like that. That's the other
Mm.
part of the equation. So we talk about Icarus, right? It wasn't just don't fly too close to the sun. That's the narrative hell I'm trying to escape, which is only hell. It was don't fly too close to the sun and don't fly too low to the ocean. And because if you do, the mist and the water, you will fall into it. So it wasn't just some don't dream too high mentality, because that's like, okay, what do I go with that? Sure, all right, good advice. It was the middle way that is very difficult to master. It was more articulate than that. And so when I'm looking at the kind of narrative conversation we're having about like, how do we get this stuff to work? What is it about? There is a generation of people who grew up to be bullies because they weren't bullied.
Yes.
And they didn't have violence, so they've kind of fetishized it. They didn't have those things. Like I tell people this, like I was talking to my kids the other day. I try to do it every now and again, right? I was talking to my kids the other day.
No, and I was saying, It's part of your story. Like, it's real.
Yeah, and this is a tiny, like, this isn't even that bad of a thing. But there was this kid who I got in a fight with, got him in a headlock, and he did a blind swing backwards with a pencil, and it hit me in the face right here, right next to my eye, and it snapped the lead off in my face. So I still have this blue, almost like a tattoo, right in my face next to where the thing went in, right? That kid was, and then he sends me a Facebook request. I'm like, dude, no. Like, I don't care how many years have passed. I need a break from you, man. But he's a chef, and so no, I'm sure he's a great, for all I know, he's a terrific guy. But the thing is, it was one of those things. But the thing about it was so funny is that I think about those things. I think about those experiences, and in those kinds of things were not an impediment to me when my kid was in preschool to making sure, I don't know why it was so important to me, but I always polished to make sure her shoes didn't have too many scuffs when she went off. They were cheap shoes, so they'd scuff.
Yeah.
But like that level of, I want to make sure my daughter's shoes look nice, is not antithetical to the pencil swing. In fact, those two go hand in hand. That's where the discipline kind of comes from in a lot of ways, which is you become a advocate for beauty in that way, but not fearing horror. And I think that people seem to believe right now that the only way you can experience happiness and joy, which is very much the parenting philosophy, right? Kids are born perfect, which is bullshit. Kids are born how they're born. And the thing about it is that, so they think the only joys in life are the joys of an infant, but those joys are small. Real life experience and horror defines ecstasy in a lot of ways, and happiness and joy. A father who's dreamed his whole life of being in a family where people weren't, it wasn't hard, has kids, and the joy they feel is so intense. The neurotic fears are much more hypervigilance, but they can't live there. And so when I'm writing, I think the reason why I'm in Comicsgate and I'm writing this book now, it's been a huge transformation for me, is because I'm understanding, and I finally kind of put together, and this started with my first two art books that I published, the power of what beauty can be. And I know you probably got to get working soon, so I don't want to keep you here forever.
Oh, no worries. And before, whoops, I forgot.
Go ahead, please.
I was trying to put you on. There we go. Okay, I was trying to put you up on the screen. Yeah, we got a little bit of time. By the way, folks, if you have any questions for Shanth, go ahead and post them in the chat, and we'll get to them. So don't be shy.
So this is one of my favorite paintings I've ever done. It's inspired by King Kong, and it is a beautiful symbol of femininity, beautiful woman. And she's got this giant, albino gorilla, which is son of Kong, from the old movies, and laying on her. But then there's this giant hand holding them both, keeping them safe. That is like my whole view on fatherhood and family and what my wishes are. It's pop, it's pulp in a lot of ways. It's absolutely pulp. It's sexiness, it's beauty, but it's powerful. And that power comes from the life experiences I've had, which have not been that, And I think that's why I've noticed that the people I connect with are not people who've had, tough experiences or easy experiences. Because to be honest, I'm married to someone who has unbelievable empathy and hasn't experienced any of this stuff. And I would just look at her and go, why did you sign on for me, babe? Mm-hmm. Like, why did you sign on for this? Like, I'm a good person. I work hard. I try to do the things I can do. And I'm hopeful and positive. But, I mean, what is it? And I think the answer to that she would give is, this is the part of the thing the human experience that I need. And so when you've got this total deprivation of hope and heroism and masculinity, and I'll tell you this, if there's one group on this planet that is spiritually starved right now, and go with me on this one a little bit. It's going to sound nuts.
Yeah.
It's straight women. And I'll tell you why. Because if you like masculinity, that's how you are happy. And you've got, I'll give you a really good example. You brought up Sausage Party. Sausage Party. This has got to be the best non sequitur. I mean, this is going to be great. We'll try to wrap that up right there, or tie that up into something.
Right.
Here's what makes our lives easier than theirs. If men walk into a room filled with men, we have the right by society to go, ugh, the hell is going on in here? What's it all this dudes for? This is a sausage party. But you do not have a social right as a woman to walk in a room filled with women and go, Jesus, this is just filled with women. Where are the guys? You can't say that socially in certain circles, because you're meant to starve. You're meant to pray your straight away. Now, we may have our straight disliked, but we're not told it's like a moral thing, at least right now in popular culture amongst other guys, unless, you know, you're in a certain circle of guys who would just hate that aspect of themselves. We go, wow, aren't beautiful women great? Yes. If you say the opposite, God, aren't men fantastic? Where do you go? What's media telling you all the time? So you have to go and get your masculinity from the most comic booky version of what you think male power is. And it's not the same thing for you. And so, you know, I've always said that that there are these amazing needs of masculinity and femininity, and when they're in concert with each other, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, right? It's like any group. And the worst thing in the world is for to have to live a life where you deny the other aspect of it. So in a lot of ways, the villainess who he is kind of locked in combat with, who he can't kill, right? And according to the plot pitch I have, the reason why he can't kill her is because I need to make sure that he has to understand her in context with this other female character that comes in. But he only knows that side of it. So if you only know, if I were, here's a big leap for you. If I was a straight woman being presented with the men in popular culture, I wouldn't want to have anything to do with them either. There's nothing I need there. They're just lesser women.
Yeah, it's also like, you know, the whole like the pop, you know, American pop culture like idea of packaged masculinity. It's the big game. Yep. It's, you know, it's like people think that, you know, masculine men are lowbrow because that's what pop culture has portrayed it. And men have unfortunately been dumb enough to kind of believe that and embrace that. I always notice something. If you look at fantasy art depicting men and women from the early pulp days up to about like the late 1980s, early 1990s, you would always see both sexes depicted, you know, if it was going to be that kind of sexy fantasy or sci-fi, both of them were sexy. You know, you had John Carter and Dejah Thoris, both of them wearing almost nothing. You know, Conan the Barbarian and Valeria, both of them just wearing basically like just, you know, loincloths. Tarzan and all that. You know, there was a celebration of not just feminine beauty, but masculine beauty as well. And nobody was like going like, oh, wow, you must be like closeted this or that, or have repressed, I don't know, or I don't know, issues or whatever, or insecurities about your own physique or whatever. It was a celebration of humanity or something. And then somewhere in American, I would say it started in the US. American pop entertainment or something, the female characters stayed sexy and scantily clad, but the male characters just got kind of really boring looking and just, they started looking like aesthetic trash bags, and
Sure.
we were sold that real men don't care about their appearance, real men don't care about beauty and aesthetic and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, there's a one guy named Tanner Guzzi who's a fashion consultant that I highly recommend
Mm-hmm.
for that kind of study and whatnot. So it's yeah, I completely agree on that point. I got a question here from.
Mm-hmm.
So you answered Fright Night's question, and
Sure, of course.
I'll post it up on the screen just in case anybody's just now tuning in. So what is the name of the book that Shanth Enjeti is making? Shanth, go ahead and pitch
It's
it one more time.
so it's Nosfero the Crypt Walker, and the campaign is live on Indiegogo right now. And there's also a tier for those of you guys wondering about the art book I showed. There's a tier where you can also get the first printings of my first two art books. So I've done two art books on Indiegogo already and fulfilled them, and they're printed, ready to rock. And so I've got those available too. And Nosfero the Crypt Walker is the first issue origin story and introduction to a new character that I've created. It's a fully painted comic book. I'm writing and drawing it, and it's dealing with all of these themes, right? That kindred spirits like Reagan Lodge and I are, that's what we're about. I mean, it's. I guess the way I put it is that the greatest. It's funny. I feel like I'm about to quote Usual Suspects, but the greatest trick that postmodernism and neo-Marxism ever pulled, in my opinion, was to get people to reverse the meaning of words and reverse what things actually mean. So, which is to say that ugliness became defined as beauty, and beauty became defined as ugliness. So, if people don't believe the job of aesthetics is to make something that is beautiful or aesthetic, right? And then you've lost art. And the opposite of aesthetic, which is brilliantly been said by people, is anesthetic. Anesthesia. It numbs you. Aesthetic wakes you up.
Wow, I didn't even think about that.
And it's not mine. I heard it from someone smarter than me, but it really made me think like, wow, anesthetic, that's the experience, right? But here's my other favorite one. If you were to come over to my house to visit, let's say, and you walk around my living room and my wife and kids are there, and you look at the wall, and all over the walls are paintings of very erotically painted nude men on every wall, it would be illogical for your first thought to be, wow, he must really hate men. Reverse that. And you actually can make that point to somebody. Look at all of these women he paints, looking sexy and attractive, and they're the whole center of his work. He must hate that group. No, what you would logically say is, he must really be into dudes. Mm-hmm. I wonder, how can she not see this? Look around, woman, look around. Right. And that is a powerful thing. So what the objective is, in many cases, and how I feel about my work is, if people look at my work, I want them to look at it and go, of course I should support and back this. It's going to be beautifully painted. It's aesthetic. It's great. There's care there. And I don't want to win a not caring contest. And I don't want to win an ugliness contest. Mm-hmm. I want any quote, ugliness in my work to be sublime ugliness.
Yes.
I want it to be like Lovecraft. I want it to, the thing about the alien designed by Geiger or Giger, depending on, he's I believe a Swedish, name, German. Like, it's a very interesting how he pronounces it versus how it is.
I think it was Swiss. I think
Swiss was that. That's what it was. That's right.
Yeah.
And but you look at his alien design; it is aesthetic. That's why people have statues of it in their houses and action figures. It's horror, beautifully executed.
Yes.
So is Frankenstein and Karloff.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just a pile of just vomitous gore or something.
Sure, because that is a anti-aesthetic experience. It's like playing the same note loudly over and over and over again. It has no meaning. So yeah, unlimited gore leaves us numb, and I don't mean from horror. It leaves us numb from boredom. Yeah. And so does limitless positivity, limitless negativity.
It's like overexposure to porn, basically.
Exactly.
It desensitizes you.
It does, because what's fascinating about it, to me anyway, is that, and this is why men are fascinating to me, is that when I see Ethan do a stream, and I would show it to my wife and she laughs at it. He's always like, I'm the king, I'm the master, I've got this stuff, because it's what we do. Like, we're guys, like, we get together art, and he's amazing and he's incredible. And then he's kind of like, so I was taking my stepdaughter and her friends to go get pizza, and I kept going, well, do you want to eat here? And they're like, no, we want to go. Like, that's who ultimately is a major factor of what we're doing, because all guys will tell you, a lot of us will say, it's like, it's not that we don't have our own dreams and ambitions and all that other stuff. We do. I have a ton of them, but I'd probably live in a cardboard box if given the choice. Yeah. Like, it's like, I'm like, well, I could buy more of this with it. I could have more paper. Like, there's a beauty and type of nuance that guys don't have, and there's a type of directness and simplicity of the masculine traits that is appealing and strong when they can work in tandem. And I think that it's, let's, again, to go back to C.S. Lewis, always winter, never Christmas. From a veteran, as you have so beautifully described, is how that man came out of the winter in his life. It is a powerful book. It is not just a children's story.
Oh, seriously.
And it started, as you know, before then, with the death of his mother. And when he was very young, she was his whole world. And then being sent off to that horrific boarding school that he went to. I mean, he had, before he even, hit the battlefield, his spirit had been thoroughly crushed. Like, he was crushed, I'm sure, when Patty Moore died. I'm sure there were many things. And so how the miracle of that man's life is how he, and I think I shared the documentary with you that shows one of his former students talking about him, who was also about to go serve in World War II, and how he talked about the whole purpose of this thing is the joy, and the love of it all, the life. Those are the people you want to hear it from. For me, the young lady who escaped North Korea that Jordan Peterson was interviewing recently, I told my wife, I said, I need you to read this, or watch this video, because these are the people that make me get up in the morning, and say, let's go have it. Let's go do our best out there and kick ass. And so I'm just looking at the chat, realizing I'm getting distracted. Yes, he grew up in the years of World War II. Yeah.
Real quick, got a question from Raji. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. He asks, what do you think about the heavy metal magazine rebirth?
Oh, what's going on right now?
Yeah.
I guess, well, it's interesting because I've heard a lot of people talking about it, and I can't comment on it because I've only seen a little bit of it. But I would question, I think it's a perfect time for there to be a heavy metal rebirth. I question whether, from what I'm seeing, it can be something that is just initiated. Do you know what I mean? It's like when people talk about, well, the character is mostly covered up because it's impractical to be nude. Or naked. I'm like, tell that to the Greeks. Tell that to Achilles. Tell that to 300, which a buddy of mine's wife, whenever he was out of town, would always want to borrow 300. I guess she was an action fan. But the thing about it
I'm sure that, I'm sure she was just watching it for the story.
Exactly. That's right. Right. and so I look at that stuff, and here's the thing about it. When I think about, Metal Hurlant and the stuff that Druillet, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, Philippe Druillet and Mobius and all them were doing, there was a rawness that was inspired by what R. Crumb was doing. And so there was this cascade. It was R. Crumb to Mobius and those cats, then Mobius to Hayao Miyazaki and Nausicaa. And you can actually see the aesthetic move across that way. I think that manga is heavy metal now. Like is there going to be Berserk in it? No. Berserk is not something and so I don't know if American custodians of American brands, if you want to call it that, or institutions have the moxie, or the experiential base to really go in there, because I don't know, I'm not sure, what's it? The 70s and the 60s were such a period of that, what we're in right now. The loss of masculinity, the loss of nothing means anything. Everybody has the same haircut. It was all these various things. Like, you couldn't tell the difference between different kinds of people. And heavy metal was a really great sort of outsider force that came on the scene, and it was like, I can't believe they're doing that. If there's a version of that now, I think it's Comicsgate.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
Comicsgate is a place where guys can kind of be guys, and it's not exclusionary. Like, I don't. It's sort of funny. The only it's such a uniquely Western American individual liberty kind of concept. And there's people who think a lot of different ways and look at us. We make different kinds of artwork, but we're kindred spirits, inklings, so to speak, as C.S. Lewis and Tolkien were. Did it mean that Tolkien loved having Santa Claus in the Narnia story? Heck no. That was a knockdown drag out for those two.
Yeah.
But that's not the issue. One writes one story, the other writes the other. And so when I look at Nosferatu, and I look at, there's people who are doing things with Nosferatu, there's people who are doing things with werewolves, there's a lot of that stuff going around. The reason why it's speaking to me is this particular perspective that I have, on, what I want to say about it. And I'm just as curious to see what other people have to say about that same kind of theme. And so here's my question I guess I would have. What does Heavy Metal, the magazine, if it's been put out there, I don't know. They talk about practicality, which to me is bureaucracy. I don't know if the practicality of, the IRS can make heavy metal. Do you get what I mean? It's the Mike Tyson, right? Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Like, that's what heavy metal is.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? They're planning it. And I go, no.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't kept up with recent heavy metal stuff. I mean, I've got some friends who work in it, and I've got a bunch of the hardbound books and whatnot. But I don't know. It's just
cool.
The more like the more like an institutional, I don't know, property tries to recreate itself. You're trying to recreate lightning in a bottle,
You've got it.
It's like, and so right now I'm not saying that it can't be done. I'm sure, sure there's going to be, some great creators in there, but I don't know. It's just like all the stuff that like gets me like a fire lit inside me. Either it's being produced in Japan, France, or independently in the Anglosphere. It's like a lot of people who've been either, whether it was by choice or being forced out of polite society industry, we've all been kind of forced out into, we've basically been kicked out of the city state into the wastelands, where initially it sucks for a while, but then you realize like, wait, there's a bunch of other people out here too. And, we're all like, barbarians out here, and we start kind of forming our own little, I don't know, little tribes and clubs and stuff. You've got Comicsgate, you've got other like unofficial groups and stuff, or little like startup companies and stuff. Like I personally, I don't really like, I don't label myself as Comicsgate, but I'm friends with a lot of people, and like I buy a lot of their books and stuff because it's like, I generally know like, okay, if this person's interviewing that person, I know this guy here has pretty good taste, so I'm going to check out this artist that they're featuring. Like I know if Narwhal or Zach is going to feature somebody, I know it's going to be worth checking out. But it's like when we've all been kind of cast out of the city state out into the wasteland. That's also how Rome got founded. It was a bunch of the Aeneid was a bunch of people descended from the people who survived the destruction of Troy.
Yep.
So it's, I don't know. It's like, it's that whole like, you're probably familiar with Mircea Eliade's kind of very similar to, Joseph Campbell and Jung and all that stuff, like the myth of the eternal return and cyclical, natures and civilization stuff. And I kind of see that mirrored in, creative industries and stuff, how, over time, these things that started off as dynamic and fresh and whatnot get slowly co-opted and taken over by more institutional powers, or they become institutional themselves. like Star Wars now. Like I see more Star Wars stuff and I just fall asleep. When as a kid,
Hmm.
that was like, oh my gosh, there's a new Star Wars game out or something. I gotta
Yeah.
have it. It's like that's not there anymore. But there's people out there like just random schmoes on Twitch and YouTube, making their own books and stuff. That I'm more excited for that than I am for like most multi-million dollar blockbusters and stuff.
And you hit the nail on the head. I mean, I think when I think about, Richard C. Meyer, and his approach to these things, he's not declaring himself a part of Comicsgate. He's his own
He doesn't
sort of
need
thing.
to.
He doesn't need to. And yeah, he's done his bit for King and Country, right? So I'm concerned, like,
Yeah.
in terms of.
I knew him back when he was just like living on couches and stuff, and like
Sure. Yeah.
when he was on like just an obscure commentary dude on Twitter.
Well, and that's the interesting thing about it, right? Is that and just one thing, because I want to respond to the thing in the chat. Going back to Heavy Metal Magazine, I haven't seen it. There might be absolutely fantastic stuff in there, but at this point in my life, one of the things that is unfortunate about the time we're in is that so many people have made me distrust brand names that I kind of see things, and I can understand some of the reticence that some people might have about CG. On that level, like, is this going to be another type of thing like that? But I think at the end of the day, the real issue is, where do people feel the most free to exercise their individual liberties and their creativity? So it's the cool thing about it right now for me is I'm looking at artists and work the way that I used to when I'd go into a comic shop as a kid, which you'd walk in and be like, I've never heard of this, but I know there's quality in here, just like with manga, just like with any of this stuff, Blu-rays. And I think that, when someone was bringing up The Mandalorian, I enjoyed The Mandalorian.
Hey, I liked it too. Yeah.
And the thing that got me about it was it really understood it was a myth. Like, Favreau clearly, knows his stuff. And so did the team that worked on it. And I think it was a really interesting thing because when you've presented people with poison for long enough, a certain amount of people, it's all they've got to eat, they're going to take it. Still, other people are going to hold out for the better stuff, or are going to go out and actively seek stuff away from that environment. And that's what's happening. It's kind of funny. It's actually the place that we have been, the burning building we've been kicked out of in so many ways, is actually a living world. And that world right there is a world of stifling bureaucracy that just is crushing, or not nurturing, even worse in some ways, the spirit. And so when I look at this stuff and you're talking about, it's like, and I've got this, look at how much we point to people who are luminous when we talk, that inspire us. We're not pointing at ourselves. We're not pointing at our own conditions. We bring it up as a matter of human to human context. But you're going, he was unable to serve in World War II, and that affected him so that he would. All that's in my head, and it's broadening my experience. And I want to be around the people. What I like about the what's going on right now is people go, have you seen this amazing person? Like, if somebody likes The Mandalorian or they don't like The Mandalorian, as long as they're coming to that opinion honestly, I'm cool having a conversation with them. That's what pop culture used to be. You'd go into the comic shop to lovingly argue with people. And when they weren't there, like that half of you was gone, you were like, well, where are they? We're supposed to meet to have our conversation. And I will say this, for anybody who's interested in backing the book, I want you to know I appreciate it. But I need to make sure I say this, not because of a time factor, but because of this, is I am grateful for these things in life, these chance meetings and conversations like the one we're having right now, because that's the stuff of life. That's why I'm alive. That's the reason.
Yeah, I think that is an awesome note also to end on.
Sure.
Shanth, one more time, where can people find you at? And just go ahead and plug your stuff everywhere.
Links in the description. My current project that I would love your support on is Nosfera the Crypt Walker. You can buy either the individual book, you can get head sketches with it, and you can also gosh, get my first 2 art books there. There's all these different tiers. I'm on Twitter as Enjeti Art, and I'm on YouTube, which I'd love your support there as well. Is the link for the Indiegogo in the description there? I'm just curious.
Let me just double check that. I'm pretty sure it is.
I mean, on the page,
It
I just was
is.
curious if they could see the campaign, so I could show them some of the stuff that's on there.
Okay. Yeah, so it is on your Instagram, and it is also in the show description. So, folks, if you need a clickable link, just go to the description of this video. It should be the top link
click
there.
That link for me, so I can show them what it looks like. The
sure,
campaign.
yeah, that's right. Let's take a look at the campaign here. Let me switch to that.
I don't even know what it's doing right now, honestly.
Yeah, let me switch the tab on that.
Oh, sure, that's right. I forgot you've got your setup there.
Yeah, it just takes me a little bit. I've been streaming on Twitch so much that
this is weird, right?
Yeah, give me 1 second. Let me just get the right screen. Sorry, 1 second, folks. Okay.
And thank you guys for being here with us today. It's great to have you.
Seriously, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us on this. Okay, cool. Now I got the campaign link here. So.
Oh, perfect. So there you go. Oh, wow. We're $90 away from hitting 6. That's amazing. So
awesome.
Yeah, this gives you a look at the book, and this gives you, the artwork. But this to me is all of the work that a lot of us are making right now. And I have to tell you, I love the title of your book. I'm going to say that again. I saw it and I'm very excited about it. So put that on the things you're considering when you're thinking about the title. But the whole idea of it is that unfiltered beauty and art and creativity being brought directly to the audience, who are acting as really the financial foundation on which these things are done. It's directly coming from you guys, so it gives us the creative freedom, and that's what's so great about this time we're in. And it might be a little, it can be a little unnerving, and it can make a person feel a little bit groundless, but much like all of the great stories that we read and look at, in this sort of fellowship that we're creating with people from completely different backgrounds and different, experiences, we have a kind of a common belief in these really beautiful ideas of humanity. And that's what I love about it. And again, I'm grateful in even the bigger sense for this opportunity that we've had today, because it's these friendships and relationships that start out of these casual conversations are a reminder that there's more than just the beginning of new conflicts and difficulties with people. And that's what I think is so great about the sphere that we're operating in right now.
Yeah, seriously. Like I just feel like this is, people talk about the comic industry is dying. There's, books, shops are closing down, all this stuff, and everything's in decline. I'm like, if you've got any kind of slight lick of originality at all, and just you can figure out a way to just put in the time to make something, like, I think that this is a great period of opportunities.
It
for
so is
anybody. Yeah,
and we can be pointing those.
Go ahead.
We can be pointing towards the light for people too, and saying, "Look, we have hope. We're not blind. We're not naive." And that's why we're connecting. So sorry, go ahead, my friend. Wrap up.
Yeah. I was just about to say, I mean, man, this has been a freaking great conversation. There were actually some other things I wanted to ask you on video and stuff. But we're running out of time and all that. But so I would love to have you on again sometime, hopefully in the not too far future, and all that, because I feel like we could probably go on at length about a whole bunch of other things I wanted to get into. But any final words before we wrap up?
Sure. Thank you guys so much, and thank you for your support. I really appreciate it. To my people who aren't Comicsgate, I would love your support. To my people who are High Comicsgate, and thank you for your support. You guys have been great, and you've been good to me, and I'm going to make some great work for you. So thank you so much. And thank you, of course, to Reagan Lodge for having me here.
Awesome. It's great talking with you, man. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. I will catch you all on the other side. Share this video around. Make sure you sign up for my mailing list for my graphic novel if you haven't already. And I'll catch you all over on Twitch sometime in the next few days. Later now.